Greetings, everybody. Tom Matuska and Brett Wingfield, live, Facebook Live, Thursday afternoon, brought to you from Spirit Lake, Iowa. Cold and sunny Spirit Lake, Iowa. The sun hasn't shone for a long time, and yesterday and today the sun came out, and Puxatawny Phil saw his shadow.
Saw his wind.
Yeah, but don't despair. He is in the freezer as we speak.
Yes.
And he is on the roster to be on a natural habitat soon. Last week we had winter games in Iowa Great Lakes.
Oh, we did. That was fun.
And I think Friday was like beautiful, and Saturday it started to cool down, I think, and got pretty cold.
Windy and cold, and I think all the outdoor games moved indoors, and people still had a good time. It was fun.
They had the kites. The kites are always cool. People fly those monster kites on the ice.
Yeah.
Snowmobile races. I think there was human bowling. I never saw how that happens, but I saw it at a distance.
Yeah. I think we see that regularly. The later in the day that it gets and the closer to the bar scene, you can see a lot of human bowling.
Whether they're entered or not.
Yeah.
Last week, I think we talked about our catalog, and most of you have received that by now. And a lot of nice new products, that we're pretty excited about. We we literally spend the whole year either developing, sculpting, molding new products for the coming year, as well as things that we buy from our vendors that we can offer to you. Got lots of new. If you go back and look, I think we went page by page through the catalog.
Yeah.
But we've got new XP forms. We've got new mule deer. We've got new noses. The noses are a huge hit. That is a real time saver for both whitetail and mule deer and antelope and impala.
And impala. And we have Champion's Choice noses.
Champion's Choice. No, that's
ears.
Those things were flying out of here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Lots of stuff on the floor.
We got the Champion Choice. I'll never list them all. But they got whitetail Fleming. They've got whitetail split lip, which is just an open mouth, not a dramatic lip curl or anything like that. In different sizes, we have mule deer in a couple sizes. I think we have an antelope. Along with reference material. And when they're filling orders, we get to see as we run through the supply company trying to pick up something for live or something like that. We see what's going out as the girls are pulling the orders, and Champion's Choice was flying out the door.
Really was. They're ear liners and they're ear bases. Neat stuff. Neat stuff.
Good stuff.
What else did we have from last week?
Oh, man.
We had our airbrushes.
Airbrushes and the
that's fun.
paint, and we're going to touch on that today. Just a lot of new tools.
Lots of new tools. I think that's the big stuff, isn't it?
That is the big stuff.
And we had lots of questions about airbrushes and paints.
And we kind of, just because of that, and we bring this up quite often, we switched to water-based paint probably almost 3 years ago now. And we get a lot of questions. I don't want to encourage it, but we have a tech support here that is second to none, and we do spend a lot of time on the phone.
We do.
Helping people get them started with different things, whether it's using the noses or any of the new products. A lot of people are confused when they get them, just exactly how to use this stuff. And one of the things we like to help people out with are the Createx paints, because the Createx paints are a big breakthrough in our taxidermy work, I think. And a taxidermist really spends a whole lot of time painting, whether it's fish or bird bills or mammals. And we've used lacquers for 40 years and have recently switched. And so it wasn't easy for us to do, and that's why we like to help people and answer a lot of their questions.
We do have a question from Brad Carnes. He is wondering if we are going to carry Champion's Choice competition earliners.
I don't know. That's a good question for Mandy. Do we have them? Are they available yet? We don't.
Whitetail, I believe, is. We carry Whitetail Competitor's Choice airliners, and then
Champion's Choice?
Champion's Choice.
Or yes, I'm sorry, Champion's Choice.
Yep. We carry the Whitetail Champion's Choice, but I don't know if we have the competition one yet. That would be the one with the inner ear. Yeah, I don't think that we have that one yet.
And we have all of the ear butts also, which is a very, very time-saving type
Absolutely, yeah.
thing. Yep,
Okay.
that's it.
That's it so far. If you have questions, make sure to tune them in.
We wanted to start you on, you know, painting and airbrushing and things like that. So we thought a good place to do that. We added the harder Steenbeck airbrushes were the big thing for us this year. And so there are so many different products, and unless you have it firsthand from somebody who, a friend of yours who uses this stuff and says, you have to try this, just by looking at the catalog, you don't know good from bad and what works and what doesn't. First of all, there is no bad in our catalog, it's all good.
That's right.
And everything works great, but some people prefer a certain version of an airbrush or hose or paint or whatever it happens to be. So we were gonna run through some of the airbrushes and kind of point you in the right direction. We have everybody out there. We can tell when we get the phone call. I'd say 85% of our phone calls start with, I'm new to taxidermy, or I'm just starting out in taxidermy. And for those type of people, many of you do this stuff every single day, and you're very familiar with how to do things, you know, what tools to use, and you can work yourself through or solve any kind of problems. But beginners, not so much. So that's like we try to help those people and point them in the right direction.
Yeah, I think we answered last week. I know I answered the what airbrush is right for a beginner question at least 3 times on the phone, at least, and maybe 4. So
And what did you say? Because there's not really a right answer there.
I think I just pressed the record button and we send them over to the. No, I think airbrushes are just like a tool in your toolbox, and there are different airbrushes for different reasons, and we'll kind of go through some of those. Big hammers and little hammers, big airbrushes and little airbrushes, and we'll kind of cover it. But I think anybody could start with any airbrush that we have on the table today, but there are some that might be a little more price friendly. There might be some that are a little bit, the single action brush versus the double action brush might be easier to learn on. So I think we'll cover all of those and maybe confuse them a little more.
When I started, we chipped our forms out of granite. When I started, you know, 40-some years ago, there were 2 airbrushes that I knew of. There was 2 supply companies. There was Jonas Brothers and Van Dyke's, both of whom have been absorbed by McKinsey. But there was Jonas Brothers and Van Dyke's, that was it. Van Dyke's carried Paasche, and they carried, and a lot of this, we mentioned this in different lives past. I think we talked about it last year. The VL airbrush is Paasche's double action airbrush, one of their double action airbrushes. That was available when I started in 1974. And not knowing anything about airbrushes except that the better taxidermists were using airbrushes, not so much. That was the belief at the time. I bought a VL airbrush. It was $70-some, and I think what are they now? They're $81.95. So in nearly 50 years, they've gone up $10. I paid $70 for my VL airbrush. I'm sure it came with directions, but at that age, I didn't read directions, and I didn't know how to use it. I knew it went to a compressor, and I figured out that, and I got a little cup that came with it, and I put house paint in it for lack of knowing what to do, and it never ran again. You know, I pretty much ruined it because I didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't the right airbrush for me starting out with no education behind me whatsoever. Paasche's I guess, least expensive airbrush is the H, and I think we mentioned this last week. This is a single action airbrush. You adjust your paint with this little roller cone up here, and all the trigger gives you is air. So the hose comes up to the airbrush, you push it down, you get air. You have to open this up manually to adjust your paint. Seems like a real pain, but it's not at all. But the Paasche single action airbrush has been around for 50 years, and like we said last week, I bet it's painted more pieces of taxidermy than any other airbrush. It is an excellent tool. I can't tell you how good this little item is, and the price today is $49.95 for an airbrush. It paints wonderfully. As you use it and as you get better and better and better and more proficient, you can graduate up to the better airbrushes. But this is one of the finest beginner airbrushes on the market, and it's been around forever. Paasche also offers a couple double action airbrushes. Double action, if you don't know, like the single action, I said you push down for air. And that's all you get. You adjust your paint up here by that cone. Double action airbrush, you push down for air and you pull the trigger back. It's on a little rocker. You pull it back for how much paint you want. And you pull it back too far, you get too much paint. You pull it back just right, you know, it's give you the right amount of paint. It has a little, I call it a governor, but it's a little adjustment wheel up here. So if you only want to paint so much paint to come out, you adjust it, test it on paper. Always test your airbrush on paper. Push down and it'll make the same size dot on all of your trout or, you know, whatever you happen to be painting. If you're painting, you know, lines on eyelids on a deer, and you don't want to have a big old splotch on him, adjust this little wheel, get the right amount, fine line, and then you can paint your eyelids. Sure. But that's a double action. A couple more double actions, and these are all reasonably priced. I mean, went from $49 to $80. This is a Revolution, and I think the Revolution is $121. It's a little higher grade Paasche airbrush. Same thing, push down, pull back. It's got a small cup up here. That's something also we should mention is these are called gravity feed. A gravity feed is an airbrush where you put the paint in the top and gravity brings it down to the needle, and as you force air through, it sprays out the tip. So that is a gravity feed cup, and we use a lot of gravity feed in our business because so much of it is intricate, I guess I'd call it. We don't need a large amount of paint. We're usually doing eyelids, or we're doing bird bills where we don't need a lot of paint. This, I don't know, quarter ounce or whatever it is in the top of this will probably paint that much paint, I suppose, if you were to spray it out on something. But that's a Revolution. And then this is a little bit bigger airbrush that we got from Paasche, and it's a Talon, holds more of your pigment. You see a lot of people doing murals on the sides of vans and motorcycle gas tanks and stuff. This is holds more paint, and you can do bigger projects with it.
Yep. Little different needle size.
Yeah, all of these have different needle sizes too.
The bigger cup also, as you tip your brush, it's a little more forgiving so that we're not pouring it out
Good
on
point
our work
compared
surface.
to this. If you filled this up to the top, and just like you said, you're leaning over your work. A story that reminds me, we had a student a few years ago that was doing a beautiful, beautiful rooster fish, and we probably have never had a student do that nice of a reproduction fish anyway, but this rooster fish was coming out beautifully, and he leaned over just a little bit with his black, and the whole cup poured on the side of his rooster fish.
And 2 hours later, you'd never know.
So
Get it
he
all
got the
fixed up.
education of painting two rooster fish, kind of.
He did. He did.
But that's a Paasche line, and it's a really good line, been around forever. We usually use a quick disconnect on ours, like you can purchase, or some of the airbrushes come with this little male nipple, and by pulling back a collar on your hose, it snaps right on. So I used my Revolution. Now I want to use my VL for a different purpose. I can grab that, or my H, I can grab that, and I can snap it on, you know, kind of like so.
Yep. Very handy, very, very handy.
So that's the Paasche line. Do you want to tell them about the Iwata? Those are your specialties for years.
We painted, yeah, that was something that, it was a long time ago now.
It was,
It
wasn't it?
was. We started painting with Iwata airbrushes, just kind of seeking out something different. I don't know that it was necessarily going to be better, and I think everybody hopes to improve their painting experience, and sometimes buying a new airbrush is just therapeutic. But we ended up with Iwata airbrushes, and I think the first one that I had was the HPC, and that's a gravity-fed airbrush, cup on top, and a double action brush, and that brush was just amazing. It was absolutely everything I had hoped an airbrush would be. It had what I felt was a little bit smoother trigger, little cleaner parts. As you felt threads, they just seemed a little bit better machined. It just felt really nice in your hand. It was balanced, and that HPC probably painted a lot of fish, but it also started a terrible trend in the HPC works so good, so maybe I need a HPB, and then eventually many other airbrushes.
Sometimes the price just keeps going up and up
They
and up.
do.
If this one works so good, the next one will be better.
But with the Iwata line, they do have a really nice single action airbrush, and that's the SAR. That's the single action Revolution. It is a siphon feed.
Little bottle like this. I'm not sure that bottle will fit on there. I think it does.
Yeah, I think it does. Yep, just like that. It's a friction fit. And so that would draw your paint up from the bottom. And your needle setting is right back here on the handle. So you would pull your needle, back here. You'd pull your needle back right there, and that will set the amount of paint that's coming out.
So that's kind of the same thing as this one you adjust up on this collar, that one you adjust on that collar.
Yep. So all of those things are basically pulling a needle back or forward into a cone and restricting the amount of paint. But that's done through this, and I know a lot of really good taxidermists that swear by this one.
Lou Winnie painted all of his fish with
did
the SAR, and whenever we'd go to a show and he'd be given a seminar, he would always paint with his, called a single action SAR, single action airbrush. And when he would get done with a seminar, he always said, bring lots of SARs because, you know, I'm giving a seminar.
Yeah.
And we'd always sell a lot of them.
Yeah. And so that's their single action offering. And we carry that. What's the price point on that one?
The SAR is, I'm coming here. You just keep talking, I'll come to it. Oh, Revolut, $121.95.
So yeah, definitely.
And
an
there is
entry.
this entry one before this, which is
the Neo.
Neo.
Yes. Yep. The Neo was introduced a little later from Iwata as kind of an entry level, but it's a double action airbrush. Has interchangeable cups. You can change the cup sizes on the Neo. A little bit bigger needle, and gosh, that's a really nice airbrush.
Wonderfully, and a Neo is $81, $84, something like that.
Great. If anybody's looking for an introductory brush and wants to venture into the double action, that's a
They're a great airbrush.
great one. They don't have the governor on the back. I think that might be about the only thing about the Neo that is different. But this is the HPB, and you want to tell them about cup sizes? They get bigger.
We got a, yeah, they have a bigger one, which is called a C.
Yep, and this is the B. It's pretty small, probably the smallest for most taxidermy applications. There's also an A, and the A is barely a little divot in the top.
Doesn't even have a cup.
Yeah, there's not much to it. So the HPB has a little finer needle than the C that we mentioned before, and I think you can do, this airbrush will do anything anybody asks it to do. I don't think there's an airbrush artist out there that's more talented than that brush. That brush will do anything you can ask it to do.
And some people think the smaller the needle size, that's a 0.2.
I think so, yeah.
Compared to the C, which is a 0.3.
Yep.
I always tell people the human eye can hardly differentiate between the fineness you're going to get between a 2 and a 3.
Yeah.
You probably can, but the average person using it, they're
Yeah,
pretty darn close.
okay.
And the larger the needle size, typically the friendlier spray it is. You're less resistant to clogs and crumbs and things like that, which are going to give you problems.
Yeah. And this is the custom micron, which this was your custom micron.
We all had to
It's a
have
C.
one of those.
Yes. And that is their flagship. That's their top end of the Iwata line. This happens to be a C. So this is the bigger cup. You can see
And that's about a $600 brush,
yes.
I'm going to guess.
Yeah. If there's a bell or a whistle, this one has it. This has an adjustable air valve down here. It has your governor back here. Just a lot of
It comes with a filter.
Yep.
Moisture trap.
Moisture trap, very important. Another nice feature of this one is sometimes we'll take the crown cap off on the front here, and I've got both the crown and there we go. The crown cap, if I don't drop it, comes off, and I believe there it went.
I got it.
There's a magnet on the back of here that, oh, actually it's threaded. That's why it didn't stick. It's threaded on the back, and you can just give it 2 little turns, and now that crown cap
You never
is right
lose
there,
it.
and you won't lose it.
I'd
like
still
we
look for it for 2
just
days.
about did. But that's just kind of a fun feature of those. But again, a double action airbrush, nothing different than any of the others. Just the biggest difference between the two in the machining is that they say the fluid nozzle, the head, and the needle are all machined together. They're individually hand ground to match each other.
So when you replace one, you should replace
yes,
both.
have to replace all of
And
that.
that's another thing that you, as long as you're along those lines, any of these airbrushes have a needle that runs the length of the airbrush, other than the H, as well as a little fluid nozzle, it's called. The needle can get bent. A lot of times people will take it out, maybe be cleaning it and lay it around, and falls on the floor, gets bent. There is a product called Sharpen Air. Sharpen Air is a little kind of a thin plastic tray that has 4 holes in it, and you can take your airbrush. They're made for different airbrushes. You put it in, twist it. We would have one to show you, but it's missing right now. But you put it in and you twist it, and it'll take the kinks out of your airbrush. A lot of times those needles, whenever I'm using an airbrush, I drop it on the floor, which you always want to have some kind of holder. But if, for instance, it drops on the floor, mine 9 out of 10, I can see this one right now is bent off to that direction. It's looking at you. So that's bent. A new needle is $20 to $40.
Yep.
We take out the needle like this, and now
Oh, yeah, you
is
can see
bent?
that.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
So that's bent, and usually when they get bent, a lot of times that damages your nozzle inside.
Yeah.
So you can take that, put it in the Sharpen Air, twist it in the first hole, it will sharpen, it'll straighten that, put it into the second hole, it readjusts your shoulder angle, and then there's a couple polishing ports, and it'll save you $20. The sharpen air is probably, might be $40, I'm not sure, but using it 1 to 2 times, and you've paid for the sharpen air.
Absolutely, and the best part about it is you can fix it immediately. It doesn't take 5 minutes to fix, rather than waiting 3 days for an ordered piece or having to go to the hobby store to try to find it.
We have in the past purposely ruined an airbrush needle just to show on live how good the sharpen air works. It really does straighten up airbrush needles and makes them good to go again. So there's 2 parts, the needle and the fluid nozzle. Usually when the needle gets bent, oftentimes it damages the fluid nozzle. Pretty soon your airbrush isn't going to be used, and so when you're working well. So when you replace one, replace both of them.
Yep, for sure. And we would probably show you that, but most of these have such a microscopic nozzle, I don't know that we could focus on them very well with the camera, or we would drop them. So, but if anybody wants to know, we can show you some of those parts too.
And any of these airbrushes, you're talking about the, I kind of listed them in entry level and mid level and high level. We went here from a Neo, must be in the $60, or is it that much? $80. On up to a Revolution was 100. I think these are in the C and B are in the 265 range for this. Now, just because you got the airbrush, $265 doesn't make you paint already. You have to have a compressor, so some sort of compressor. We have a lot of compressors, but we have a big Quincy downstairs with air that comes up through the floor, and our airbrush hose is just hooked into that hose, and we can, with our quick disconnect, we can snap that right on, and we're good to go. Now you can get a specific airbrush compressor, and airbrush compressors are rather expensive for the size that they are. You can go and get an airbrush, or you can go and get a compressor at Home Depot for maybe a couple $100. But when you get into an airbrush compressor, they're a little bit more, and they tend to be quieter.
Yep, typically quieter, and they'll have, more often than not, they'll have a tank and they'll have a continuous flow, rather than some of those little compressors that give you the
run all the time.
Yeah, the little piston and the pressure can vary on those. So I would say a tank, some kind of a tank or a continuous run
They're
compressor.
very nice.
Yeah, and the quieter the better. The last thing you want to do, especially with the little color cup, is be painting along and have a big loud compressor go off behind you. And
it does. It's bothersome to me.
Yeah.
I like quietness. But I mean, they make silent air compressors, and I'd say they're this big, and they're $600, $700, $800.
Yeah.
You know.
As loud as your refrigerator.
Yeah.
So
louder.
And we have an Iwata compressor back here. You'll hear that run now and then. It's not very loud, but you can still talk over it, and those are nice.
And we have new airbrushes this year.
We do.
A new line.
That was really exciting. I like new airbrushes. That's fun. And you showed up with these one day.
Kind of pretty, aren't they?
They really are.
So anytime something new comes out, and we have to decide if it's something worthy of the catalog to offer to you, we get one, and then I don't show it to Brett, and I paint with it, and he says, "Oh, where'd you get that orange airbrush?" Anyway, so then we let him try it and see if he likes it. And if he likes it, because he's kind of a proficient painter, we implement it and start using it. But these are Harder Steenbeck.
Yep.
They're an exceptional little airbrush, and they run similar to all of them. They come with different size. This is a gravity feed, of course. Different size cups. You can get a big cup and a little cup.
Yep.
The mechanics of it are the same. They have a little. Brett was talking about a governor, and that's kind of a term I use too. You can turn this, it'll only let you pull that trigger back so far. So if you're trying to do real intricate, and like I say, eyelids on a deer, or spots on a trout, or markings on a crappie, if you can't pull that trigger back way far, you're not going to get a big old splotch of paint. So by adjusting this, you can tone it down so it won't let you. Most of these airbrushes have that. The Talon has it, the Renegade has it, the VL has it in their own different way. All of these have it, you know. So most of the airbrushes have them. But this was a Chameleon. It's the first one we got. It's aluminum, so it's lighter. We like that. The shape is small, not a big, huge airbrush. There are some big ones on the market. And it painted exceptional, and it came with, I think, a couple different needles and a couple different nozzles. And the first thing I did, look how far that needle sticks out there. First thing I did was bent mine at a 90-degree angle, so I'm on needle number 2. But that's called a Chameleon, and it's, I think, an infinity Chameleon. Company's harder Steenbeck. We think it's one of the best products we offer.
Yeah, I love to paint with it. It took not 10 minutes to start thinking, man, this is really something special. It's a little smaller in your hand. One of the things that it does have that's slightly different, we have the governor, but anybody that's used the airbrush very long knows that it will eventually dry in the tip. And especially when you're painting very, very fine spots, you'll have to be able to clear out the paint, push through some of the dry paint that comes on the end. And it's nice just to be able to pull your needle back and blow that dry paint off of there and then return back. So with this needle, with this airbrush, you can actually set the preset so that it will return back each time. So by pressing the button, I can only pull back so far, but if I want to completely pull all the way back, I just pull this back.
To flush it out.
Yep. To flush it out, I pull that back, and then to get right exactly back where I was, I just push that button again. So that'll take me back to the exact same restriction.
And that's the only airbrush that has those are the harder Steenbeck versions.
That I know of. As soon as we say that, as soon as we say that, somebody will say, oh.
Randy Russin would like to know, he has a Paasche VL. It came with some jars. How long or what do you need to do after using? I do not see any little cover for end.
It depends on what kind of paints will make a difference. And I don't have one of those here. I was going to bring one up, but they're in different packaging, and I'd have to cut it open, so I didn't. They'll have a little, either a straight glass jar, or they'll have a triangular one, kind of a cone-shaped one, that's nice to set it down. If you're using lacquers, which we used a lot, we would mix our lacquer, we'd put in a little bit of thinner to thin it, we'd put a little bit of retarder in it, and paint with it. So say we had red in here. You want to paint another color? I had one with a thinner. So I would take the red bottle off, set it right here, put the thinner on, flush it out, so I got the red out of the gun, pick up my green or whatever color I selected, and spray with that. It's very good. You can paint a lot of different colors pretty fast that way. At the end of the day, you're not going to paint for another week or two. What do you do with those bottles? There's a product, and do we still carry Ready caps? They're a little red cap, and they slip right over the end of your siphon tube, and they're plastic, and they will index right on there. Now, we do have them. Ready caps, and you get 20 of them for $6. And you use them over and over and over. You never have to get new Ready caps. You're going to sweep them up is what will happen to them. But you put them on there. Now, also on every paint bottle, it has a breather hole. And that breather hole, if it gets clogged, your airbrush will not spray. So as you're spraying, if all of a sudden your airbrush quits spraying, the first thing I always do is we always have T-pins around, grab a pin and make sure that breather hole didn't get splashed with paint from the inside and clog over. So that's the first thing you want to check. Now to keep it from drying up, you put the ready cap on here, and we would just take a T-pin, because they got a big head on them, and drop it down that breather hole, and that paint is good for months, really,
yeah.
long time, with lacquers.
Okay, we've got another question from Kenneth Baker. He has the Neo and the compressor that came in the kit, but he thinks it doesn't have enough pressure. Should he step up to a better compressor?
We paint with a lot of low pressure. People always say, you know, how much pressure do you want? I think if you look at most airbrush manuals, they'll say 35 pounds of pressure you want your compressor to go to. We paint a lot of times at 5, lots of times. If your paint is coming out really, really coarse, or maybe not coming out, try thinning it, I think. It takes less air to blow thin paint than it does thick paint.
Yeah, and another idea too is this fluid nozzle on the end here can get plugged up with old paint, especially water-based paint, and it's not a bad idea to clean that out. You'll notice your paint volume increases, and sometimes that's feels like more pressure once you get that cleaned up. I've noticed that I feel like I have a little less pressure and a little less pressure, and take that apart and clean it out, and it seems like that helps a lot too. So
I always like to take my airbrush, and whether it's a siphon feed or bottle, and put thinner in it, and just spray and see how the thinner comes out. If the thinner comes out really good, but your paint doesn't, I'm going to bet your paint's too thick.
Yep.
And most airbrush paints say airbrush ready, but I've never I never use them without thinning them myself.
Yeah.
Show them your new favorite little tool, which I think is the best thing we ever got.
I think these
along
are
these
really
lines.
cool. So this is, you saw these in the harder Steenbeck line. This is basically, I think they call it a fluid nozzle cleaning needle, and it is basically a short little needle that is flat on one side, and it's going to be super hard to show, but because it's flat on one side, there you go, wow.
Nozzle cleaning set.
Because it's flat, you can see it's flat right there. When you put that in, so we can take that out. I'll bring this airbrush back up and try and show you. I'm going to take the needle out of this. You might have to back up just a tiny bit, Kate. I'm too shaky to be that close. But what we can do is take this cap off the front and expose the fluid nozzle on the inside, which this is what we didn't want to hold for the Iwatas because they're half this size or less. But that little cone is what restricts your paint flow, and that can get plugged up. And then we just take this the cleaning needle, and we put it right in through the back.
And it actually shaves that paint off the inside.
Yep, cleans it right out of the interior of that. And it's nice just to work it back and forth, giving it, you know, a little twist at the same time. And boy, it will, if you've got any old dry paint inside, this will clean it up. Does a really good job.
I cleaned my airbrush nozzle really good with thinners and back blew it a couple weeks ago, and we just got those, and you said, let me try this, and he shaved it, and I mean just twisted it, and it just reamed out the paint.
Yeah.
Don't do it hard, because you could ruin your nozzle. Just really soft, but it will shave that dried paint.
Yeah, yep, they're fantastic, and it's not a very expensive tool. It's 20-ish, and you get the brushes.
You
that
get a
go
couple
with it.
little brushes and things.
Yeah, that's a tremendous little tool, and as we've kind of gone back and forth and mentioned before, we're painting with water-based paints. That is something that I noticed with the water-based paint a little bit more, that it does like to build up a little bit more.
You gotta keep your equipment cleaner than we did with lacquer. And we'll get into this when we start talking about paints, but lacquer paints, like you were talking about storing it in the bottles. we have had times where our lacquer paints dried up in the bottle. Oh my gosh, what do? I'm out of green. I'd put a little bit of lacquer thinner in there, shake it up. It reconstitutes itself instantly, and it resoftens in your airbrush too. Not so with water-based paints.
All right, we've got Jared Gunderson that says, really appreciate these videos. Getting back into it after years off, and these videos are priceless. Thank you all.
Thank you. It's fun to do.
And then Kenneth is wondering, it says, it platters when I'm trying to paint spots.
Spatters.
Yep.
Spatters would be low air pressure or thick paint.
Yep. Or
dirty.
Or possibly, something on the end. Make sure that the needle is super clean on the end. The end of the fluid nozzle is clean, that your paint is thin enough and your pressure is appropriate.
There's a lot of problem solving with airbrushes. The more you use them, the more you're going to be able to figure this stuff out. But spatters, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the tip of my airbrush. Doesn't look too bad. If it's dirty, I will take a Q-tip like that, dip it in whichever solvent for whichever kind of paint. I would clean that out. You can take that off, put it in a little lacquer thinner. If you're using lacquer paints, put it in a little 4011. Yeah. If you're using water-based paints, and clean that, pull the airbrush out, clean that. That's really 30-second repairs, you know. And then check your air pressure to make sure you have enough air to blow your paint. If it's still splattering, and you've got good air pressure, it's going to be too thick a paint maybe. And paint will thicken in time, you know, just being in those bottles. I always thought that using plastic bottles, like we did for all of our Dear Usual siphon bottles, for using those, I insist lacquer the vehicle or the solvent in the lacquer escapes through the side of the plastic. I know it does because it gets thicker as it sits in that bottle.
Yep, I agree.
And all it takes is a little squirt of thinner, shake it up, good to go again.
Yep. And if all of those things, if you've done all of those things and you continue to encounter spatters, it's always nice to have a magnifying visor or some readers and look very closely at those little teeny tiny parts. The cone and the fluid nozzle could have a little crack in it. That was something that would happen with the H. With that cone, it's threaded so they screw together, and it is possible to over tighten that, and if you push that needle into the cone too far, it will bugle or flare out the end of the cone, and it will get little tiny cracks in the end.
Students would do that all the time. You notice we don't have any that watched this, a year ago or more. We had a big paint table here, and we had ports or holes that held 16. We had 4 sets of 4 airbrushes. We had 16 airbrushes like this. We could paint 3 students. Each student had 8 colors, and they would just pick up the green, set it down, pick up the red, set it down. It was a wonderful little system. But what they tended to do was tighten this down really tight to shut their paint down, and then they would force the needle through the cone, and then the cone would split, and then the next time they paint with it, it would spray out the side. You can tell when you're painting and you try to do it right here, but it's over here. You know, it's painting out the side, or it's spatter or something like that. So we always had to have a lot of cones on hand. They're $7 a piece, but we always had about 20 cones just to do damage control on the students wrecking our equipment.
And that principle goes to any of these airbrushes. They all operate on the same system, a needle and a cone, whether it's a great big one like the H or a teeny tiny one like the Iwata. Those 2 parts have to fit together extremely well in order to restrict that paint flow. So look at those. If you're still encountering problems, look at the fluid nozzle.
And that chameleon comes in a beautiful blue and red too.
That. Yeah,
isn't that nice?
That's a nice one. Same as the orange one here, but a little different color pattern. And that has a .2 needle and a .4 needle, I believe, and the complete assembly for those. So it comes with the tip, the fluid nozzle, and the appropriate needle. So those are pretty neat. Yes.
Craig says, glad to see you guys back. Missed your videos. Hello from Second Nature Taxidermy. And then Brad Cutler is wondering, can you use the nozzle scraper on the Iwata brushes?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Again, don't push it through too hard, but yeah, you can.
And then Johnny Campbell would like to know, do you prefer a double action or a single action brush?
We use typically double action airbrushes, but I think if that single action, either the SAR Iwata or that's the Hansa. You like that, don't you?
I do.
This is like your favorite airbrush.
And it's a single action, so
We would
any
do
of
just
those.
fine with any of these.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're using for no reason other than we got new stuff.
Yep. This was a new one from the Harder Steenbeck company that we got. Tom put it on my desk to try, and I tried it for a few minutes, and I thought, wow, that's really nice. And I tried it for a few more minutes, and I thought, oh, that's really nice. And I just never took it off. It does anything you would ask an airbrush to do. The neat thing about this one, or different, it does take a tiny bit of getting used to because there is no down. The idea of pressing down on every one of these airbrushes has been that way for years, and now there's no down, it's all back. So what happens is you set the needle distance here and pull back for air, which is very different.
You keep going to that one every time, and that's I even listed it on the entry level as it's $130.
Yeah, and it's very nice. It's very, very nice. I like it. It's convenient, and spraying. It's a .3 needle, and spraying with the Createx paints, it matches up really nice to the consistency that we have. So if somebody's asking, there's nothing wrong with those single action airbrushes.
No, that Hansa is,
they're awful nice.
I've seen what you can do with it.
Kenneth would like to know, what size needle is best for doing spots on a crappie?
Maybe depends on the paint.
Yeah, yep. I think you could get away with doing it with anything, but it's more, I think it would be more a derivative of your paint, your painting style. Do you paint with really thin paint, or do you like a little heavier paint? But I think any of these are generally between 0.3, 0.2, 0.3 would do it just fine. I think that's what...
We used to think, I mean, we have used every airbrush that we have here, and we started, I don't know what size needle and cone that these have. They're called 3s and 5s and things like that. But we started out with that, and we thought we were pretty darn good in those days. We graduated up, and then we went this whole route, and then we got into the Iwatas until you and I both have custom microns, which is, and the C's or B's, which are as precise as you can get.
Yeah.
And we did pretty good, but I think you can almost, unless you're painting initials or names on pieces of rice or something like that, you can precision yourself out of the airbrushing game too.
Yeah, that's a good point. You really can. So I would say any of these, any 0.2, 0.3 is going to be just fine for you.
And that Hansa is at a 0.3?
Yes.
And I've seen what you can do with it. And again, between a 0.3 and a 0.2, my eyes cannot tell the difference.
Right.
They can get extremely fine, smaller than any crappie marking,
That's 1/100th of a millimeter.
Yeah.
Or I guess 1/10 of a millimeter. But.
All right, we've got a few people tuning in with questions and comments. Matt Turney loves the lives and the new app. He says it's a game changer.
Nice.
Jacob Weersama would like to know, what size needle do I use on a deer nose?
I guess that would depend too on what you're doing with the deer nose. And just to tell you a little story, Brian Olson entered a buck and a doe on that big oak leaf at the various competitions, and he said he painted a halo around each segment on the nose. I can't see each segment on the nose. I mean, you have to put a visor on, and then he was using like I think an Iwata B with thinned paint and low air pressure, and you can paint really intricately, you know, but you got to be able to see what you're painting. So now you got to do 3-power magnification also.
Yeah, same thing. If I think it's just going to match your
whatever
paint,
you
your
can
application.
paint. And what's nice with most of these, but especially with the infinities and the chameleons, you can get big needle and a nozzle and a smaller needle and a nozzle, and try this one and then try that one and go, whoa, this is way better. You know, it was maybe a $30 combination, and you'll settle on what you like the best.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because we carry the needle nozzle sets for I think all of the infinities, so you can add those to them as well if you wanted to try something bigger. So it comes with both the needle, the fluid nozzle, and the air cap, so you can try those pretty easily.
And the infinities too have like some of these others, they have a siphon feed, which is like this.
That's like the BC Iwata.
Yeah. And my thinking was, whenever we went to a gravity, that it's going to paint easier if the paint can gravity go down. It's going to paint better rather than having to force that airbrush to suck it up, you know. These still paint wonderful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and there are several people that still choose those. Corey was just here yesterday, and he's a siphon feed guy.
Randy says, I just purchased the Pan Pastel bird kit. When using the airbrush in Pan Pastels, can you go right on top of the lacquer, then fixative between Pan Pastels, or fixative before Pan Pastels?
Fixative over your Pan Pastels. Make sure or your airbrush will blow it off. So if you use Pan Pastels, tell me if I'm wrong, but dust them with fixative, which sets it. Then you can airbrush over that, and you can come and Pan Pastel over your airbrush. You can keep sandwiching that paint.
As long as you lock down, like Tom said, lock down your Pan Pastels, because they are a powder. Just lock them down between layers, and they work really well.
And Pan Pastels, I found too, doing reproductions or something or bird bills or something that's a slick surface. If you take that slick surface and dust it with a matte or a fixative first, it gives a texture for the Pan Pastels to stick to rather than a slick surface. Works, it's helpful too.
And we talked, I think our intent was to get towards surfaces here.
We never got there yet.
But that's a really good point. We'll talk about how to prepare each of the surfaces for different types of paint or different types of
We'll do this
pigments.
again. We'll carry on next week to get into the painting part. And the first time that I ever talked to Craig Kennedy with Createx, he was saying, what kind of substrate are you using? And I'm going, what kind of substrate? What's a substrate? You know, I don't know what some of these paint people know. But we'll explain that to you. It's kind of helpful to help you.
Got a lot of questions today. Bert McClellan would like to know, is there a difference in paint thinner? And if so, which do you prefer?
Yes. Depends on what kind of paint you're using. In lacquer paint, there's thinners that you buy at the hardware store, or there's thinners that you buy at the automotive store. And we found that a slow evaporation rate, in its matter of fact, it's right here. This is what we use for our lacquer paints, and it was Omni, and it's called slow reducer. They call it a reducer, not a thinner, as compared to what we get at the hardware store is lacquer thinner, and we use lacquer thinner for cleaning our airbrushes or spilled paint or whatever, but when it comes to thinning our lacquer paint, get a high quality, and the reason it's a slow reducer is because it slows down. Lacquer paint dries real fast. It dries in the tip of your gun, and it will stop the spray. by using a slow reducer, it doesn't evaporate as fast and you can spray longer.
Yep.
So when it comes to lacquers, we use a slow reducer.
Yeah.
Purchased from an automotive store. It's probably twice the cost of low-grade lacquer thinner.
The cleanup thinner. When using, and not to get away from that too fast, but when using water-based paints, you're still going to use a reducer rather than just water or Windex or things like that. Highly recommend a reducer to go along with it. It does make a big difference, but use the appropriate one and you'll have...
Water paints, you can use denatured alcohol. You can use water. People use Windex. People use acetone. Probably more. But nothing works as good as the reducers that they sell for it.
For the paint,
You can
yeah.
clean them with other things, but
Yeah.
do use the reducer. It'll make a difference too.
It does seem to make a big difference. And then just to touch on it quick, we have a lot of newbies asking questions, and do be aware that paint thinner is not the same as lacquer thinner. Paint thinner is usually mineral spirits.
Yep.
And that would be appropriate to an oil-based paint. So lacquer-based paint, use lacquer thinner. Oil-based paints, go to your paint thinner.
And do you recommend an air respirator while airbrushing?
If you're using oils or lacquers or any of that, yeah. And if you're starting out, get in the habit of wearing it and you'll get used to it and it will not bother you. If you try picking it up after painting for 20 years, you're never going to use it. But yeah. And they even say for water paints, it's a good thing to use a respirator. We are so fume friendly around here. I mean, we haven't run our exhaust fan at all since we've been using water-based paints. Water's heavier. It comes out of your airbrush and goes straight down. The lacquers comes out of your airbrush and it fills the air and you breathe it.
Yep, you can see it. Yep.
Chad says do you reduce the Createx water base? I haven't and like the results.
Yes, and that took us a long time to learn.
Yep. Again, we'll use oftentimes the 4011 or 4012 depending upon what's handy. I don't think we found a big difference. But we do thin them, especially the Wicked colors. The Wicked colors are a little bit thicker. They are nice to reduce, and the illustration colors you can reduce.
But they spray nice a lot of times right out of the bottle.
Yeah. So depending upon which Createx paint you're using, you may not have to reduce them as much. But with the Wicked colors like this, they're a little.
Some of them are like pudding.
Yeah, some of them are a little on the thick side. They go further because there's more pigment, and you can reduce them considerably. But they don't always spray perfectly out of the brush. They also say when you reduce paints, they recommend a minimum of giving it 5 to 10 minutes for it to emulsify.
That was a big thing we learned too.
Yeah.
That was helpful.
Yes.
If you are going to thin it, don't put in the reducer, stir it up, and try to paint with it right away. You'll be very disappointed.
Yep.
Go get a sandwich and come back, and you're going to be amazed at how good it works.
Yep.
And I believe, is it correct that we sell air respirators on the website?
Yep, we do have a respirator, don't we, back with the safety equipment? We sure do. I think we have one that has replaceable cartridges, and we may even have the disposable dust masks.
Yeah, I think we do.
And
COVID kind of cleaned us out.
Yeah, we can probably.
We couldn't
get
keep
those
any
in.
of this stuff in.
Yeah. Safety's usually somewhere back here, but yes, I'm.
Yeah, and they've
I'm
got the
nearly
canisters
positive
with
we do.
replaceable filters and stuff.
Well, that's it for questions
That's
so
it?
Oh,
far.
good.
All right.
Oh, good.
Well,
we didn't.
let us tell you about next week, I think. We're
Yeah.
going to carry on the same line, and we're going to get into paint, maybe touch on air and hoses and things like that, because there's some helpful things for you that you might like to know. And we'll talk about lacquer paint, and we'll talk about acrylic paints, and we'll talk about substrates.
Yep. And I think that's really important. It's just getting ready for paint. A lot of people, again, we've got some kind of beginners, and so preparing the surface is really important. It'll give you the best opportunity for really good results. So we'll get into that.
And
I think we have a giveaway.
the giveaway is
It is,
a little starter kit of Createx paint.
And that's
And
pretty fun.
all they had to do was like and share, like and share, like and share.
yes. So the winner for liking and sharing last week's live video goes to Randy Russin. And I actually think Randy is tuning in on YouTube. So
Oh, good,
nice.
good, good, good. Randy, give this a try. If you've been spraying lacquers and waters do not play well together in an airbrush, so don't switch back and forth. Clean your airbrush really, really, really good. We even got, when we started with Createx, we got new parts for our airbrush, new nozzles, new needles. But give it a try, you're gonna love it.
You will. You really will.
Congratulations, and tune in next week.